I'm a big fan of visual novels, which should be obvious at this point since I refuse to shut the fuck up about it. I think visual novels are unique in that they offer the descriptiveness of traditional books while also being able to utilize art and music to aid the story. But here's the thing, a lot of visual novels are made for people who already like visual novels. They can be pretty lengthy. Seriously, it's not uncommon for visual novels to take 50+ hours to tell you the whole story. It's also pretty normal for visual novels to have kind of a slow start. They take their time to establish the setting, characters, and plot. While that does have some positives, it also makes it really hard for new readers. It can be tough to power through that initial slog, especially if you're not used to it, and I think that's part of the reason visual novels only have a niche following. So that's why today I'm going to recommend 5 visual novels that I think are perfect for people who need something to start out with, and as a bonus, every single visual novel in this video is 100% free. The only thing you'll have to invest is time. These are in no particular order, and of course links to everything will be in the description. Number 5. Narcissu. Oh yeah, I'm busting out the big guns straight out the gate. Narcissu is a story about 2 young adults facing terminal illness. On an impulse, they end up stealing a car and take an impromptu road trip. Now here's the thing. Narcissu is a very powerful, sad story dealing with themes of mortality. The main characters are dying, and it's made clear from the outset that neither of them have all that much time left. Of all the visual novels on this list, Narcissu is probably the one that invoked the most intense emotions in me. Everything about these characters, their struggle, and how their circumstances have totally broken them is explored, and you genuinely feel for them. I've personally seen how a slow, creeping death can affect people, and let me tell you, many of the behaviors and attitudes of the characters in Narcissu are extremely accurate. This is definitely a visual novel that will completely wash over you, and even if you're not necessarily a fan of heavier stories, I feel it's a good demonstration of how powerful visual novels can be. Additionally, it's actually quite short. I personally finished it in one sitting. It pretty much dives right into the deep end. Another really nice feature is that there are actually multiple translations you can choose from. Since most visual novels are originally in Japanese, visual novel readers will eventually read a lot of translations of varying style and quality. The 2 translation options, which you can choose in-game, are one that aims to preserve the writing style of the Japanese work, and one that takes some liberties in order to produce a natural-sounding story. In my opinion, both are perfectly fine and it's ultimately down to personal preference, but it's nice to be exposed to 2 different styles right off the bat. You can get Narcissu and its prequel bundled together on Steam. It may be over a decade old, but it's still top tier. Number 4. Sunrider, Mask of Arcadius. This one is a little bit different. Some visual novels are also video games, and there are times when the line between the two can be a bit blurry. While this video is mostly going to focus on visual novels that are just visual novels, hybrids can be a gateway into the visual novel fanbase for gamers. Sunrider is a science fiction space opera with turn-based strategy gameplay. Sunrider was originally a Kickstarter success story, and in a surprising turn of events, due to the overwhelming levels of funding, developer Love and Space opted to make the game free, though if you want to play the sequel, you will have to pay for it. The gist of the story is that you are the commander of a starship, but early into your deployment, your home planet is completely destroyed and its military crippled, Death Star style, by the space communist villains. No, I'm not joking. Throughout the course of the game, you'll recruit others who fight alongside you in mech suits. The story features a cast of characters that I find to be funny yet also sympathetic. Some people do criticize the use of common anime tropes for each character, but I personally feel that there's a good balance between caricature and actual characterization. But one thing I will praise is the sense of scale. You're literally fighting an impossible war for the fate of the galaxy. While the writing as a whole is nothing I'd consider a masterpiece, you really do feel like what you're doing is important, and I find that to be incredibly immersive. As for the gameplay, it has its issues, many of which are fixed in the sequel, but it still holds up fairly well. It feels immensely satisfying when you blow up an enemy ship, and each character has voiced call lines when they take an action, and I have to say the English voiceover work is pretty solid. The game also has a really interesting approach to difficulty. The default difficulty is pretty brutal, and I'll be honest, I couldn't beat it. But even though the intended difficulty does result in the Steam reviews referencing Dark Souls a lot, and there are several difficulty modes above that, you do have a lot of control over how hard you want the game to be. The lowest setting makes combat basically a formality. Despite being generally difficult, it is very accessible to people of all skill levels because of this. And man, oh man, the soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. Unfortunately, I can't play any of it here as it is copyright bait, but I will include a link to the playlist of the game's OST in the description. If you're into turn-based strategy, this is definitely a game to check out. You can get the all-ages version on Steam with the 18+ patch, as well as a direct download of the game being available from the publisher's website. Number 3. Katawa Shoujo. Oh yeah, if you're familiar with visual novels at all, this one's probably gonna bring back some memories. This is the one that will consistently make its way into people's recommendations, and it was actually my entry point into visual novels, and it remains my absolute favorite to this day. Now with all that being said, I actually debated whether or not to include Katawa Shoujo in this video, and that's because honestly, it's a bit of a slow start. Certainly it's not as bad as some visual novels out there, but the first act of the 4 serves mainly as setup, and you may want to read one of the other entries on this list first. I do think it's very beginner friendly, and you should read it early on into your visual novel journey, but it may not be the best choice as your very first read. Despite all that, Katawa Shoujo is held in very high regard, and for good reason. It tells the story of Hiseo Nakai, a high schooler who was diagnosed with a serious heart condition resulting in his transfer to Yamaku Academy, which is a school specifically designed to cater to students with physical disabilities. The visual novel features 5 different story routes, each one focusing on a love story with one of the girls, with good and bad endings for each. The story does a really good job of bringing a more human element to the idea of disability. There's a lot of focus on how each person's disability affects not just their everyday life, but their outlook and their interactions with others. It touches on some pretty serious topics, though it never gets super heavy like Narcissu. And another thing I have to mention is the fact that this was not made by a professional studio. No, this was actually a passion project between a bunch of users on 4chan's A board, which is where all the weebs hang out. But despite this being simply a passion project that wouldn't even be monetized, Katawa Shoujo is extremely high quality. On a technical level, it's seamless. The writing, while it does have some minor issues, is incredible. The art is great, and the music is phenomenal. The music is good. This is one of those soundtracks that brings back nostalgic memories when people hear it, even if they haven't touched Katawa Shoujo for years. I, for one, think that the music of Katawa Shoujo is absolutely beautiful, and I listen to it in the car pretty frequently. I would highly recommend adding Katawa Shoujo to your reading list. It's available via direct download from the developer's website. Number 2. Homeward. Okay, now for a nice little underground gem. I happened to stumble across this one by pure chance, and boy am I glad I decided to give it a shot. At first glance, the rough and somewhat generic art style might fool you into thinking this is a middle-of-the-pack production. But once I got into it, the story was intense, and after reading the director's notes, I realized it was deeply personal to him, probably more than anything else in this list. Homeward tells the story of a teenager who'd been moving from country to country his entire life. While on the surface it appears to be a standard multi-heroine romance story, it's really about the turmoil that comes with constantly uprooting your life. When you live your life in so many different cultures, it ends up feeling like you don't belong anywhere, and even if you do find happiness, it's all ripped away when you inevitably have to relocate. Homeward also does a great job telling the story of flawed individuals. While every one of the 4 main characters are ultimately likable, they each have severe and uniquely believable personality flaws. I felt like I was actually reading about human beings. You know, people aren't perfect. Even good people make morally bad and impulsive decisions at times, and these decisions have consequences. Homeward is a really intense story. There are points when you can really feel the protagonist's mental anguish and can relate to his depressive actions, even if you don't agree with them, and let's be honest, you shouldn't agree with all of them. The music is also pretty nice. While it doesn't stand out too much from the crowd, it's great at pulling you into the world without being distracting, and the song that plays during the heaviest emotional moments really does a great job at conveying the emotional turmoil and that spiral of negative thoughts. This is another fairly short visual novel, and you'll probably have it completed in a few days, so it's perfect for people who don't want to sit through a 50-hour epic tale. It's available via direct download on the Renai archives. Number 1. DokiDoki Literature Club. You probably all saw this one coming. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to use it to clickbait the crap out of this video's thumbnail. DokiDoki Literature Club is probably the single most successful visual novel in the Western world. Even people who aren't into visual novels at all are familiar with it. So what can I say about DokiDoki Literature Club without spoiling it? Really, not very much. It starts out like a pretty standard multi-heroine dating sim, but before long it becomes so much more than that. I really can't do it justice without ruining it for you. All I'll really say is that it was clearly a project designed to test the storytelling limits of what a visual novel can be. If you give it a shot, all I ask is that you stick with it until you get to the point where it's clear why this project in particular stands out. Don't worry, it'll be glaringly obvious, and at that point you'll probably be riveted. I know I was. The story twists and contorts in such a way that it's entirely unpredictable, yet still, well, realistic isn't the right word, but it all makes sense. You might even have a bit of an existential crisis. DokiDoki Literature Club is also pretty short. Chances are you'll be able to finish it in only a few sittings at most. Again, I really wish I could say more, but you'll see why I can't before long. Just make sure you go in completely blind. You can get DokiDoki Literature Club on Steam or via direct download from Team Salvato's itch.io page. So there you have it. Visual novels are a wonderful thing, and it does pain me to see people turn away from them entirely because they start with the wrong one. It's like watching someone try to run a marathon without training first. It's just not going to work out if you jump right into the deep end without preparing for it. So if you're new to visual novels or interested in what they can do, I'd highly recommend every single one of these titles. Hell, even if you're an experienced reader, I'd still recommend any that you haven't read. After all, they're free. There's absolutely no risk in picking them up, and you just might find something amazing. Thanks for watching. Please consider leaving a like or a comment if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you want to see more. I've been doing my best to upload a video every single week, and so far it's been working out, so you can expect that for the foreseeable future. Also, let me know in the comments if you know of any other newbie-friendly visual novels. I haven't actually been reading visual novels for all that long, so I'm still working my way through a lot of the must-read classics. I'd definitely be willing to revisit the topic once I have more under my belt. Well, with all that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back.